Hello everyone and welcome back to the good stuff. We are continuing the 1858 clash between Paul Charles Morphy and Adolf Anderssen, so the Morphy saga, and it's the fifth game of the second match. So if you've been following what's happening so far, Morphy won the first match, the big one, and now while the photographers are getting ready to take their photo, they are already playing the fifth game. So as some of you noticed in the comments, luckily it took such a long time to take a photo. Otherwise, this match would never happen, and we would not have this beautiful 6 games featuring only the King's Gambit. So this is, I believe, the most famous game from the second match. Some of you have seen it, some of you haven't, but for those of you who will see it for the first time, get ready because, well, it's going to be a real treat, and it will definitely improve your Sunday, or maybe a Monday if you're not watching this maybe right now. So without further ado, let's check it out. Morphy has the white pieces and he opens with e4. This does not come as a surprise to you, as it's 6 games of the King's Gambit. Sorry about that. And Anderssen replies with e5. We have f4, the King's Gambit is on the board, e captures on f4, Anderssen accepts the gambit, knight to f3, and the g5. We already mentioned the strongest reply for black, and then now comes h4 by Morphy. We have g4 and knight to e5, and we've already seen all of this. If you, we're not going to be discussing all of the lines since we've covered most of them in the previous videos of this match, so if you haven't seen the other games from this match, do check it out to understand this a little bit better. Knight to f6, and now knight captures on g4. And now there are, well, some moves that you can play here, some moves you can't. Anderssen tried some that you really can, but here he goes for the absolute best continuation, knight captures on e4. We have d3, challenging Anderssen's knight to g3, now attacking the rook, and the bishop captures on f4. And this is the first moment where we have to well, check what do you do. Basically, our candidate moves are knight captures rook, and maybe queen to e7 check first, maybe trade off the queens, and then capture the rook. So let's see what's happening if queen to e7 check. Well, it's a fine move. Anderssen is already down 4 points in the match, so maybe trading queens this early on in the game doesn't really help him, but it's a really funny line, so I will show it. Let's say bishop to e2, queen to b4 check. Now we're gonna block with the queen, and now you can't capture the pawn and go after the rook because bishop to e5 check just wins the game for white. The knight here nicely defends this bishop, so instead you would have to go for a queen trade here, and after, let's say, king captures on d2, black would grab the rook, but now comes knight to f6 check, king to d8, and now knight to d5, going after the c7 pawn. Black would defend it, and now we get bishop to g5 check, and while black could somehow try to avoid going into a perpetual here, maybe with king to e7, it doesn't look like something that black would be willing to do. So most likely what we would see here is a nice perpetual. Knight d5 opens up a discovery, then we repeat, and we have another perpetual. So after bishop captures on f4, Anderssen doesn't really enjoy this queen to e7 move, so he goes for knight captures on h1. And okay, now Morphy plays queen to e2 with check, and you have to block with the queen. If you block with the bishop, then it's just a very quick checkmate. Knight f6 check, the bishop cannot capture, it's pinned. King to f8, and now bishop to h6 will be checkmate. The knight covers this, bishop covers this, knight covers this, so obviously you can't go there. So Anderssen has to block with the queen, but it doesn't matter. Still knight to f6 check, king to d8, and now there is only one good move for Morphy here, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting it. It's not a winning move, but it's the only move that allows white to stay in the game. So to all of you who found it, congratulations, as it's bishop captures on c7 with check. The king now has no squares. Your only move is to capture the bishop. So king captures bishop, and now Morphy delivers knight to d5 check, forking the king and the queen. And while this seems like, okay, Anderssen should just resign now, not really, because after king to d8, Morphy grabs the queen, bishop captures on e7, and we get this position where, yes, Morphy has a queen, but Anderssen has a rook, a dark square bishop, and a knight for, or rather, we can choose this knight for a queen. So it's not bad. 2 pieces and a rook are definitely better than a queen. The problem for Anderssen is that all of his pieces are still undeveloped, and this knight still has to figure out how to get back into the game. And Morphy plays queen to g4. He takes away the g3 square from Anderssen's knight and is planning to win it. Queen h3 will capture the knight, and that's it. Then Morphy will simply be up material. And interestingly, this position happened also a year after this game was played, but Anderssen had the white pieces, only he didn't go queen to g4, he played queen to h5, and he won a very nice game against Bertolt Schule in his hometown of Breslau, where he came from to visit Morphy here in Paris. But here Morphy played queen to g4, and now comes well, a nice d6, attacking the queen and also taking away the h3 square for the white queen. We have queen to f4 now, going after the f7 pawn, but Anderssen says, I have to develop, I don't really care about pawns now, rook to g8. And now knight is coming to g3, that's the point. So Morphy has to do something. He plays queen captures on f7, now threatens to pick up the rook, but now bishop captures on h4 with check. King to d2, king to d2, and now comes rook to e8. And here Morphy has to decide how to continue this game, and it's not an easy choice because, well, of course you want to develop, but if you just continue knight to c3 and think you're getting a rook into the game, not really. The bishop is covering the e1 square, and just bishop g5 check, you've just blocked the c3 square, so your king doesn't have anywhere to go. The rook covers these three squares, bishop covers c1, it's, well, king to d1, knight is coming to g3, it's just looking very ugly for white. And another thing, after rook to e8, Morphy could go for queen to h5. Seems like it's winning. The bishop is attacked, and if the bishop moves, we win the knight. The problem is there's this bishop to e1 check. And now after the king moves, we're going to play knight to g3, attack the queen, get our pieces into the game, and black is just, well, pretty much winning now because there's no way to win that knight. So after rook to e8, Morphy plays knight to a3. Now it's a little bit better, since bishop to g5 will be met with king to c3. But this is something that black should do nonetheless, because if bishop g5, king c3, then we simply continue developing. Bishop to d7, and, well, although it's looking pretty shaky, I mean, the king is still on d8, it's actually perfectly fine for black. If knight to c4 going after the pawn, we defend it, king c7. If queen to d5 going after the pawn, bishop to f4, and black is holding this. But Anderssen, after knight to a3, played knight to a6, and this is now a problem, because now Morphy just goes for it, queen to h5. Now this is possible, as, well, there is no bishop to e1 with check, the rook covers that square, and there is no bishop g5, the queen covers that. So here we have bishop to f6 by Anderssen, and now Morphy simply picks up the knight on h1. There's also a fun line that starts with rook to e1, because we're now threatening to pick up the rook here. Anderssen would have to trade, captures, you get a knight into the game, but now queen to f7 goes after the bishop, and only after the bishop moves, now we go knight to b5, and now we're controlling a lot of critical squares here, and we're going to start winning some of the pieces, because there are so many checks in the position, and we're going to be able to pick up at least one of these pieces. If bishop to d7 attacks the knight, we're going to deliver queen to g8 check, and after the bishop blocks, now we simply play queen to g5 check, king to c8, and now we pick up the knight on g3. And now the problem is, if bishop captures here, then we deliver queen to g8 check, and we pick up the rook here. So white will always be up material. It was another way of treating the position instead of Morphy's direct queen captures on h1. But okay, here Anderssen has to figure out how to continue, and he plays bishop captures on b2. And this will simply not to do. Another one way that could allow him to continue is bishop to g5 check, but this entire game is so complicated that we could simply show lines, endlessly. But I'm going to show this one as it's also very nice. King to c3, and now bishop to e6, and it really seems like Anderssen has Morphy's king on the run, bishop covering all of these squares, the knight covering this, the rook coming to c8, but Morphy would be able to defend with b3. It looks very ugly, but it works. Bishop f6 check, now we play d4, and only after rook to c8 check, now we play king back to b2 and allow the capture of the d4 pawn. Bishop captures, king to b1, we've escaped, and white should be better here, even though it looks incredibly ugly, but it's definitely black's best way of trying to defend this position. So instead, after queen captures on h1, Anderssen doesn't find this idea of bishop to g5. He plays bishop captures on b2. I mean, who wouldn't? And now Morphy simply finds the quickest way to victory. Queen to h4 with check, king to d7, and now rook to b1. That's the good stuff. Anderssen captures the knight here, and now we have queen to a4 with check, and it was in this position on move 23 that Adolf Anderssen resigned the game. So interestingly, Morphy wins all of his games with white in less than 25 moves. First with white in 19, second with white also in 19, and third now with the white pieces in 23 moves. And it doesn't really matter what you play here. If you move the king away from the defense of the rook, we simply capture the rook. If you go king to e7, we play rook to e1 check, and then capture the rook. And if you try to defend with king to d8, it's not a problem. We're just going to capture on a3, attacking the d6 pawn, and there's no good way to defend this. Whatever you try, you can't move the bishop, the b7 pawn falls, it's just really, really ugly. If rook to e6, we're going to play d4, now prepare bishop to c4, and if knight to c7, now trying to get some pieces into the game, we attack the rook, bishop to c4, let's say rook to g6, and now queen to f3, and that's it. There is no good reply here. You can't really move anything. If the bishop moves, we capture on b7. The rook can't really move anywhere. We're really going for that f8 square. And if knight to e8, then we simply play rook to e1. And again, black is simply in too big of a zugzwang almost, because whatever you play here simply just ruins your position. There really is no way to play this. Bishop to f7 can be played attacking the rook and the knight. It's just ugly. You could play rook captures followed by bishop to f7 check. You pick up the rook. There are some lines are good, some are better, but all of them are winning. So yeah, after queen to a4 check, Anderssen resigned, and this is Morphy's 5th victory in a row in the second match, which leaves us only with one more game while the photographers are getting ready to take their photo. So will this match end by, a Fischer result of a 6-0, or will we have a nice comeback by Anderssen? Stay tuned and check it out in the next episode of the Morphy saga. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A very nice King's Gambit adventure. Always play the King's Gambit. I would like to thank Online Buy More, Dimitar Angelov, Sean Shkera, Luke Sims, and Barry Barton for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga until it ends. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.